7 months pregnant. The day Suzy went to the mall to pick out maternity clothes, she discovered that her husband, Fu Shichen, had a second home outside. Brother, I've decided to get a divorce. I plan to keep the child and go back to Bay City to settle down with the baby. There was a few seconds of silence on the phone before Su Xinglan's hoarse voice came through. I told you a long time ago that Fu Shichen is inherently cold and unfeeling. You can't warm his stone heart. Su Zi's eyes reddened. Blame me for overestimating myself. Su Xinglin said softly. Come back. It just so happens that the Su family is still short of an heir. The Su family can afford to raise you and the child. Okay. After I finish the formalities, I'll take the child home. After hanging up the phone, Su Zi looked up at the hall where the birthday banquet was being held not far away. Fu Shichen and his adopted sister, Shen Weiwei, were gazing at each other, drinking from their intertwined arms. The man, who was usually aloof and distant with a cold expression, seemed to be touched by worldly desires after having some wine, becoming vibrant and animated. After the intertwined arms were emptied, Fu Zaikan's close friends applauded and cheered. Shen Weiwei's 2-year-old son, Fu Nianxi, wearing a birthday hat, was held in Fu Zaikan's arms. Kicking his legs excitedly, Fu Zaikan's good brother touched Fu Nianx's little face and asked curiously, Chen, is Su Zi's baby 7 months old? Does she know that you had her pregnant with this child to use the umbilical cord blood to save Nianxi? Another person scoffed. So what if she knows? She's been fawning over Chen for so many years. Even if she finds out, she'll probably be grateful and thank Chen for being willing to give her a child. That's true. If Weiwei hadn't gone abroad back then, and Su Zi hadn't taken advantage of the Fu family's crisis to sneak in, how could our Chen have married her? Several people burst into laughter. Brother Chen, once Nianxi recovers, what are you planning to do with Su Zi? Fu Shichen was silent for a few seconds before condescendingly saying, after all, she did give birth to a child for me. As long as she doesn't make trouble, I don't mind supporting her for life. Someone spoke up for Shen Weiwei. Weiwei is your wife. She worked hard to give birth to Nianxi and has suffered so much for you. Do you plan to keep her in the shadows forever? Shen Weiwei quickly said, don't make things difficult for Brother Chen. As long as Nianx's illness can be cured and my son and I can stay by Brother Chen's side, I'll be content. As she spoke, she looked at Fu Shichen gently, her eyes full of sincerity. Fu Shichen immediately hugged her with heartache. I will give you an explanation. Su Zi stood not far away listening, tears streaming down her face. 6 years ago, she came to North City to study and met Fu Shichen, her brother's good friend. With his sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, even in the simplest white t-shirt, he was the most eye-catching one, standing casually in the crowd. At first sight, she was captivated. Her brother advised her that Fu Shichen was aloof and detached, and from childhood, he had never allowed any woman to get close to him except for his adopted sister. Su Zi laughed unrestrainedly at that time, even more determined to get him. In that case, his emotional experience is simple and clean. I like him even more. She launched a passionate pursuit of him, using all means to tease and entangle him. During the school anniversary celebration, she passionately confessed her love to him in front of the entire faculty and student body, but he simply said calmly, declined. At the alumni reunion, she took advantage of her drunkenness to secretly kiss him, only to be pulled away by the scruff of her neck. He personally spoon-fed her hangover soup, dragged her out for 2 hours in the cold wind, and asked, are you more awake now? The most outrageous time was at his 22nd birthday party, when she wore a sexy nightgown, hid in his bed, and tried to give herself to him. He only glanced at her, then took off his coat to wrap her up and threw her out the door. Along with her, the 4-piece bedding set she had been lying on was also thrown out. Su Zi became more courageous with each setback, thinking that as long as he hadn't fallen in love with someone else, she still had a chance. Until 3 years ago, the Fu family's investment failed, the capital chain was strained, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Shen Weiwei abandoned the Fu family and ran away abroad with a large sum of money. She couldn't bear to see Fu Shiqing languishing day after day. So she knelt before her parents, begging them to help the Fu family, seeing her infatuation with Fu Shiqing. Her parents proposed a marriage alliance to the Fu family, and Fu Shiqing was forced to marry her. Since then, although their relationship hasn't progressed by leaps and bounds, it has had a touch of the subtle and enduring. 7 months ago, Shen Weiwei returned to China with her child. He suddenly proposed, "Let's have a child." At that time, she was ecstatic, thinking it was proof that he had completely accepted her. It turned out that the reason he wanted a child was just because he wanted the child in her womb to save Shen Weiwei's son. It turned out that he wasn't aloof by nature. It was just that the person he loved was his adopted sister, and their relationship was unacceptable to the world, so he painstakingly hid it. Suzy took out her phone with teary eyes and bought a plane ticket for departure 3 days later. After that, she returned home, took out the marriage certificate from the safe, and went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The staff took the marriage certificate, typed a few times on the keyboard, and then looked at her with a complicated expression. "Miss Su, your marriage certificate has expired." Suzy looked at her in confusion. "Expired? Marriage certificates have an expiration date," the staff member said sympathetically. "You and Mr. Fu Shiqing divorced 7 months ago, so the marriage certificate has expired. You are currently unmarried, but Mr. Fu is married." Suzy's face turned pale in an instant. Her lips trembled. Her voice strained. His wife is Shen Weiwei, and their child is named Fu Nianxi." Suzy rushed back home and opened the safe in Fu Zikin's study. Inside the safe, there was a thin red book, carefully treasured. Suzy took out Fu Zikin's marriage certificate with trembling hands, opened it, and burst into tears. The woman on the marriage certificate was indeed named Shen Weiwei. Unlike the impatience and indifference on his face when he took wedding photos with her, when taking wedding photos with Shen Weiwei, his eyebrows and eyes were soft, and there was a shallow smile hidden in his eyes. Obviously happy. And the marriage certificate was registered on the very day Shen Weiwei returned to China. Shen Weiwei returned to China with Fu Nianxi and moved into her home. Suzy loved the child because she loved Shen Weiwei and sympathized with her as a single mother, taking great care of them both. To treat Fu Nianxi's leukemia, she used countless connections to secretly search for a suitable bone marrow match. It turned out that Shen Weiwei had stolen everything from her on the very first day she returned to China. From beginning to end, she was just a tool for bearing children. Suzy cried silently for a long time. Downstairs, Fu Shiqing and Shen Weiwei had returned with their child at some point, and the laughter of the family of 3 never stopped. It wasn't until she heard Fu Shiqing enter the study next door that Suzy supported her heavy body to get up, print a waiver of custody agreement, and head towards the study. She was in a daze and forgot to even knock. Pushing the door open directly, "Fu Shiqing, I have a document here." A flurry of sounds erupted from inside the study. Suzy was stunned, wiping away the tears from the corners of her eyes as she looked inside. Fu Shiqing sat behind the desk, his expression somewhat strange, his brow slightly furrowed, as if he were uncomfortable, or as if he were something. Suzy subconsciously walked towards him. "What's wrong with you?" As soon as she moved, Fu Shiqing looked at her coldly. "Get out." Suzy bit her lip, her voice strained. "Sign this document." And before she could finish, Fu Zikin's tone became even colder. "Get out." Suzy's eyes involuntarily reddened from his harsh tone. She clenched the documents in her hand and turned to leave when Fu Shiqing suddenly groaned. She abruptly looked up at him, her gaze landing on the study window. On the pristine window, half of Shen Weiwei's face was clearly reflected. She was kneeling between Fu Zikin's legs. Suzy staggered back a couple of steps, unable to stay any longer, and turned to flee in panic. She rushed back to her room, collapsing in tears. The television in the bedroom suddenly turned on by itself. The content on the screen flickered for a few seconds, and then switched to the scene inside the study next door. After she left, Fu Shiqing finally couldn't bear it any longer, and pulled Shen Weiwei from under him, pinning her against the desk. Since she found out she was pregnant, Fu Shichen had never touched her again, and even used the excuse of being afraid of affecting her sleep to sleep in the study in separate rooms. But now, the man who had been restrained and patient in bed was uncontrollably prostrate on the woman, so forceful as if he wanted to carve her into his bones. The next door was crazy all night, and she also shed tears all night, until she couldn't bear it anymore. She turned off the TV, and the dark TV screen reflected her swollen face, pale and embarrassed. The next morning, Suzy was at the dining table eating when Shen Weiwei came downstairs carrying her child. Her gait was a little strange, her legs clearly overused and unable to close properly. Suzy thought of the scenes she had witnessed the night before, and gripped her chopsticks tightly, the food in her mouth tasting like wax. She got up expressionlessly, about to go straight upstairs, but Shen Weiwei smiled triumphantly. Can't take it already. In the past, Suzy had felt more than once that Shen Weiwei and Fu Shichen were too close, but when she brought it up tactfully, Fu Zaikan's face turned cold. Saying that Shen Weiwei had a pitiful background and was a helpless orphan, she was adopted by the Fu family as his sister, so he would naturally take care of her. Suzy then comforted herself, telling herself that his favoritism was just doting on his own sister. At this moment, looking at the arrogance and smugness on Shen Weiwei's face, she only felt a sense of irony in her heart. So this is how the Fu family dotes on their sister. Suzy looked at Shen Weiwei coldly. Last night, did you deliberately cast the screen onto the TV in my room? Shen Weiwei got up and walked towards Suzy, smiling as she spoke. Yes, I wanted you to have a good look at how much your husband loves me. You took great pains to snatch him away while I was abroad. But now that I'm back, with just a flick of my finger, he's back by my side. As she spoke, she tugged open her collar, instantly exposing the ambiguous purple and blue marks on her body to Suzy's eyes. Shen Weiwei looked at Suzy's pale face, becoming even more smug. Is he this energetic when he's in bed with you? Suzy bit her lip tightly, finally unable to bear it any longer, and raised her hand to slap her cheek. Shameless. Ah. Shen Weiwei's face turned from the blow, but the look she gave Suzy was more amused than angry. Suzy's heart skipped a beat, a bad feeling rising within her. In the next moment, she saw Shen Weiwei push Fu Nianxi, who was standing beside her, heavily to the ground. The child fell to the ground, his head hitting the table leg, and he cried out in confusion. Mommy! Shen Weiwei screamed in exaggerated panic. Nianxi. She rushed over and hugged Fu Nianxi tightly, then cried to Suzy. I'm sorry, sister-in-law. It's all my fault. I'm an eyesore to you. You can hit or scold me however you want. Please don't hit Nianxi. I beg you. I will take Nianxi and move out. Please don't hurt my son. Please. As she spoke, she kowtowed to Suzy repeatedly. Fu Shichen heard the commotion in the study after she bumped into something twice. He rushed out and helped Shen Weiwei up. What happened? Shen Weiwei hugged Fu Nianxi and shook her head, crying, looking like she was too scared to tell the truth. It's nothing. It's all my fault. I made my sister-in-law unhappy. It's right for her to teach me a lesson. Meanwhile, Fu Nianxi, in her arms, was kicking her legs and crying, reaching out to Fu Shichen for a hug, calling out Daddy. It hurts. In an instant, Suzy guessed Shen Weiwei's intention, her face pale. She hurriedly explained to Fu Shichen. Fu Shichen, it wasn't me. She did it on purpose. Fu Shichen looked at Shen Weiwei's swollen face, then at the injury on Fu Zaikan's forehead from being hit by the table leg, and the look he gave Suzy was so cold it seemed he wanted to tear her apart. Suzy, what exactly did Weiwei and Nianxi do wrong that you have to punish them so viciously? You knew Nianxi was sick. How could you treat a child like that? He stood on Shen Weiwei's side without hesitation. Suzy's thoughts of explaining instantly dissipated, with tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at him, her words carrying a double meaning as she spoke each word clearly. Fu Shichen, the child wasn't born by me. The illness wasn't caused by me. Why should I be responsible for them? Wrong. Their existence in this place is wrong. Fu Shichen looked at her, enraged. Suzy. This is the Fu family. It's not your place to make decisions. Wei Wei and Nianxi can stay as long as they want. If you can't stand it, then you get out. After speaking, he picked up Fu Nianxi, who was still wailing, and took Shen Weiwei's hand. Rushing out to the hospital, tears streamed down Su Ziyi's face as she watched the backs of the family of 3 disappear into the distance, her nails digging into her palms, drops of blood dripping through her fingers. She lowered her eyes, looking at her already swollen belly, and choked with sobs. Baby, your father doesn't love you, but you still have mommy. Well, leave tomorrow and never come back. She took a deep breath and turned to start packing. Packing up was easy, although she and Fu Shichen had been married for 3 years. He never spent any anniversaries with her. The only gift he ever gave her was the wedding ring on her finger. As for the gifts she had given him for every holiday over the years, he had casually tossed them aside. Where they gathered dust, she packed them all up together. She arranged for the donation of anything that could be donated, and she threw away anything that could be thrown away. The things she wanted to take wouldn't even fill a suitcase. Finally, Suzy rummaged through the depths of the closet and found a few thick diaries. She had started recording them since she met Fu Shichen. Suzy opened them, and a young girl's thoughts leaped onto the page. The heart-fluttering excitement of our first encounter. The disappointment and frustration after being rejected. The ecstatic joy on the day I married him. The hopeful anticipation upon learning I was pregnant. Every word, every sentence, was filled with love for him. Step by step, we've arrived at this point. And her heart is now as cold as ashes. Some feelings, when forced, are destined to be unfulfilled. She packed on and off for the whole day. The next day, before setting off, after putting the suitcase in the car, she took the diaries to the garden, finding an iron basin. She tore off the title pages one by one, watching them being devoured by the flames. At the moment when the diaries were completely burned, leaving only a pile of ashes, it seemed that her love for him was completely let go. Suddenly, Fu Ziken's questioning voice came from behind. What are you burning? Suzy was stunned for a moment, turned to look at him, and directly changed the subject. How is Nianxi? Fu Ziken's voice was a little low and hoarse. He has a bit of a fever and needs to be hospitalized for observation temporarily. Suzy asked in confusion. Then why are you back? Given how much he cares about Fu Nianxi, shouldn't he be at the hospital taking care of Shen Weiwei and her child? With Weiwei taking care of him, he doesn't need me. Fu Shichen looked at her deeply before saying. Today is our 3rd wedding anniversary. I made a reservation at a restaurant. Let's have dinner together. Suzy was stunned for a few seconds before she remembered that it was indeed. In previous years, she had always looked forward to it the most, starting to prepare gifts a month in advance. But now she had actually forgotten. And Fu Shichen, who never remembered these anniversaries, actually remembered this time, and even left Shen Weiwei and her son to come back and accompany her. Suzy also happened to want to talk to him about her leaving, and nodded when she heard the words. Okay. The two went to the restaurant together. Fu Shichen actually booked a restaurant. Moreover, it was ordered from her favorite restaurant. And the seat was her usual one. The meal was eaten in unusual silence. Both were preoccupied and hardly spoke. Suzy felt a mix of complex emotions as she looked at the face she had missed for so many years. Fu Shichen. 6 years ago when the Fu family had an accident. My parents wanted a marriage between our families to invest in the Fu family. The day after our marriage, I prepared a divorce agreement for you. I married you only to reassure my parents so they would help the Fu family. Although I admired you, I was unwilling to force you to marry me in this way. Therefore, I was willing to divorce you and give you freedom. But you refused me then. I want to know why. She had never understood why. If he really loved Shen Weiwei so much, he could have just explained it to her. Although she loved him, she would also step aside magnanimously. Why did he have to deceive and lie to her, treating her like a fool to be played with? Fu Shichen heard her words, stunned for a few seconds, before looking at her and saying softly, at that time, I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. These few words brought tears to Suzy's eyes. Her heart filled with bitterness. There was grievance, but also a sense of relief. So, in his 6 years with me, there had been moments of sincerity. She took a deep breath, rummaged through her bag for the document, flipped to the signature page and handed it to him. Fu Shichen, I have a document that needs your signature. Fu Shichen looked at her, took the pen and signed his name directly, before asking, what document is it? Suzy took the document and stuffed it directly into her bag. With the matter finally settled, she felt a sense of relief in her heart. A smile appeared on her face, and she looked at him and said, is it too late to ask after signing? Fu Shichen looked at the smile on her face and smiled unconsciously. You wouldn't hurt me. As soon as the words came out, both of them were stunned. He knew very well how good she was to him. Yet he still hurt and used her for the sake of Shen Weiwei. Suzy felt complicated. She clenched her bag, ready to tell him the news that she was about to leave. She had consulted the doctor and was told that donating umbilical cord blood would not harm her or the baby. Although Shen Weiwei and Fu Shichen were at fault, Fu Nianxi was innocent after all. Fu Shichen let go of the custody of her child, and she was willing to donate umbilical cord blood to save Fu Nianxi after the child was born. Fu Shichen, what I actually had you sign was a waiver of custody. Before she could finish speaking, Fu Ziken's phone rang abruptly. That exclusive ringtone belonged to Shen Weiwei. Fu Ziken's expression changed slightly. He, who would always eagerly answer Shen Weiwei's calls, hung up directly this time. As soon as the phone was hung up, it rang again. Fu Shichen hung up again, and Shen Weiwei called again and again. After 3 consecutive calls, Fu Shichen finally couldn't help but answer with a worried expression. Shen Weiwei must have said something on the other end of the phone, because his expression changed abruptly. He glanced at Suzy, then said softly to Shen Weiwei, I understand. After hanging up, he looked at Suzy and asked, Z, what were you going to say just now? Suzy sighed. It's nothing. Go and be with Shen Weiwei and Nianxi. Anyway, he would find out later. She took the lead, carrying her bag as she walked out of the restaurant. Fu Shichen quickly followed, forcefully grabbing her arm. I'll take you back. Suzy looked at him in surprise, and finally just said, okay. The two got into the car together. Fu Shichen started the car and suddenly said, Z, haven't you always complained that I haven't taken you on a trip? When Nianxi is discharged from the hospital, how about I accompany you abroad? By the time Fu Nianxi is discharged from the hospital, she will have already returned to base city. However, it was rare for Fu Shichen to say this, so she didn't want to spoil his mood, and simply said, okay. Fu Shichen seemed relieved and suddenly emphasized, I will be good to you in the future. Suzy felt a strange sensation in her heart and turned to look at him. Suddenly, she saw a car diagonally accelerating and crashing towards their car. Suzy's expression changed drastically. Fu Shichen. Fu Shichen quickly turned the steering wheel, but the car crashed straight into Suzy's passenger seat, just as the car crashed into them. Fu Shichen suddenly lunged over in a panic, shielding her in his arms. Z. Bang! The car was sent flying, only stopping when it crashed into a roadside bollard. Fu Ziken's head was cut from the impact, and fresh blood trickled down his cheek, but he couldn't care less about that, and instead hurriedly looked at Suzy. Z. How are you? My stomach hurts so much. Suzy was completely panicked. Feeling a wet patch beneath her, she reached out and touched it, a mixture of liquid and blood gushing out. Her face turned deathly pale. My water broke. Fu Shichen. Save our child. Please save our child. Fu Shichen held her tightly. Don't be afraid. I'll take you to the hospital right away. Suzy maintained her last shred of consciousness, clutching his hand tightly. Fu Shichen. Save the child. No matter what. Save the child. Having said that, she completely lost consciousness and fell into a coma. When she woke up again, she had already been taken to a hospital room. She was alone in the room. Fu Shichen was not there to watch over her. Her once high and rounded abdomen had become flat. Suzy was suddenly startled awake, and she tore off the 4 needle from the back of her hand. rushing out of bed. However, as soon as she moved, a sharp, pulling pain came from her abdomen, and her legs went weak. She fell to the ground in a disheveled heap. The hospital room door opened just at that moment, and the sound of high heels tapping against the floor echoed. Shen Weiwei stood at the doorway of the hospital room, looking down at her with a triumphant smile. Awake. Suzy suddenly looked up at her. What are you doing here? Where's Fu Shichen? Shen Weiwei smiled even more smugly. Nianxi just finished surgery and is weak right now. Of course. He's watching over our son. As for me, I couldn't bear to see you kept in the dark. So of course, I'm here to kindly tell you the truth. Surgery. Fu Nianxi just had surgery. Suzy recalled the strange details of Fu Shichen before she fell into a coma after the car accident, and suddenly realized, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. Shen Weiwei looked at her pale face and stepped forward with a smile, tapping the video on her phone's screen to play. Suzy wanted to avoid looking, but her eyes were involuntarily drawn to it. In the video, Shen Weiwei hugged Fu Shichen, crying and begging. Shichen. The doctor said that Nianxi was frightened and his high fever won't go down. His body is now very weak, which has led to the aggravation of his leukemia. If he doesn't have an umbilical cord blood transplant, I'm afraid his life will be in danger. A struggle appeared in Fu Ziken's eyes. Kuzi's baby is only 7 months old. The probability of survival if born now is too low. Let's wait. Shen Weiwei grabbed his arm. We can't wait any longer. Nianxi can't wait any longer. I'm begging you. Suzy can have another child if she loses this one. But I had a massive hemorrhage during childbirth and had my uterus removed. Nianxi is the only child we'll ever have in this lifetime. You're his father. Please save him. Fu Shichen looked at her, his lips trembling. Shen Weiwei simply released his arm and took 2 steps back. Okay. I won't force you. I won't blame you if you don't save Nianxi. But if my son is gone, I don't want to live either. Just let me die with my son. After speaking, she turned directly and rushed towards the window, pretending to jump down. Fu Ziken's expression changed drastically, and he rushed over to hug her tightly. In the end, he compromised and said, I promise you. The video ended abruptly. Shen Weiwei squatted down in front of Suzy, smiling triumphantly. Suzy, Shichen took you out to dinner. Are you feeling very proud? Thinking he has feelings for you? How naive. That was your son's last meal. He's still soft-hearted after all. Couldn't bear to bring you directly to the hospital, and deliberately arranged a car accident, wanting you to think the child was lost because of the accident. Suzy grabbed Shen Weiwei's arm tightly, her eyes bloodshot. Where's my child? Where is my child? Shen Weiwei raised her eyebrows. That bastard of yours. He's being rescued in the operating room right now. If you hurry over there, you might catch his last breath. Suzy hurriedly pushed Shen Weiwei away, struggling to get up. She was already weak and simply couldn't push Shen Weiwei over. But Shen Weiwei fell directly to the ground, letting out a miserable scream. Ah, Miss Su. I only heard that you were hospitalized for surgery and kindly came to visit you. How could you treat me like this? Suzy was stunned. Sure enough, she heard Fu Ziken's voice the next moment. Weiwei. Fu Shichen rushed over with a look of urgency, pushed Suzy away, and then helped Shen Weiwei up. Suzy fell to the ground. The wound that had been torn open when she fell out of bed was now even more bloody, and the pain made her face pale. Shen Weiwei leaned into his arms and looked at him with tears in her eyes. Shichen. I really don't know where I offended Miss Su. She gets angry whenever she sees me. Fu Shichen glanced at Suzy with a grim expression. Suzy, what exactly do you want? Since Weiwei returned to China, she has been cautious and tried to please you. But you are always aggressive. She is my Fu Ziken's person, not someone you can scold and beat as you please. His accusations, every word, sounded pathetic and ridiculous to Suzy. Clearly, she was the one who had just undergone major surgery and was struggling to even get out of bed. Yet he was certain that she could hurt Shen Weiwei. Since Shen Weiwei returned to China, she had been taking care of Shen Weiwei and her son in every possible way. even giving the baby room originally planned for her child to Fu Nianxi first. It was clear that from the very first day they returned to China, they had taken everything from her. But in his eyes, it had become her overbearing behavior. Su Zi's eyes were red, and tears rolled down silently. She didn't argue, but stepped forward, staring intently at him, and said each word distinctly. Fu Shichen, if anything happens to my child, I won't let any of you three off. The hatred and determination in her eyes were like a ball of fire, almost burning him to ashes. Fu Shichen looked at her in surprise, a sense of unease surfacing in his heart. Su Zi, what do you mean by that? It's clearly your fault. You, get out of the way. Su Zi was too lazy to explain, pushed him away, and turned to walk towards the operating room. The blood from her wound slid down her trouser leg, and every step she took barefoot left a bloody footprint. Fu Shichen was shocked and subconsciously let go of Shen Weiwei, wanting to step forward. Z. As soon as he moved, Shen Weiwei exclaimed. Shichen, my foot hurts so much. It feels like I sprained it just now, and my head is so dizzy. A struggle appeared on Fu Ziken's face. But in the end, he said to Shen Weiwei, I'll take you to see a doctor first. He looked at Su Zi deeply, a hint of struggle appearing in his eyes. Su Zi was always obedient and rarely lost her temper. He'll be fine after a little coaxing later. In the end, he still picked up Shen Weiwei and left first. Su Zi walked step by step to the entrance of the operating room. A nurse came out of the operating room, and Su Zi quickly grabbed her. Nurse, how is my child? The nurse was shocked at the sight of her covered in blood. Why are you here? You just had a section. You shouldn't be out of bed. Su Zi stubbornly grabbed her, repeatedly asking, how is my baby? The nurse looked at the tears in her eyes and comforted her. The baby was premature and suffered a car accident, so an emergency section was performed. But don't worry. The doctors will do their best. Hearing this, Su Zi staggered and knelt directly in front of the operating room door. She wept helplessly, praying, God, if someone has to die, please take my life and let my child live. He's so young. He hasn't even had a chance to see the world. I beg you. She knelt in front of the operating room door, kowtowing 99 times, just praying for her child's safety. The phone suddenly rang. Su Zi picked it up woodenly. When she saw her brother Su Xinglin's name, she answered and burst into tears. Brother. Su Xinglin originally wanted to ask her why the ticket time had arrived, but she hadn't shown up. As soon as he heard her crying, his heart was in his throat. What's wrong? Su Zi endured the pain and briefly recounted the matter through tears. Su Xinglin suppressed his anger and said in a low voice, don't be afraid. Your brother will bring people over right away. More than an hour later, a private plane landed urgently on the top floor of the hospital. Su Xinglin and a tall man arrived in a hurry with an entire medical team. Su Zi and the child were rushed onto the plane, until the plane gradually took off, watching the hospital become smaller and smaller in view. Su Zi pinched her palm tightly, and said to Su Xinglin with tears in her eyes, Brother, I don't want to see Fu Shichen again in my life. Fu Shichen took Shen Weiwei to check her ankle, but nothing was found. Shen Weiwei's arms were tightly around his neck, looking weak and innocent. Fu Shichen looked at her face, but his mind was filled with the image of Shen Zi's eyes, swirling with hatred. As she looked at him, he had seen disappointment in her eyes, passionate love, and joy. But this was the first time he had seen hatred, and her disheveled appearance, covered in blood. He carried Shen Weiwei all the way into Fu Nianx's hospital room. He was awake at this moment, gazing eagerly at the planes flying further and further away outside the window. Dad, look, an airplane. Fu Shichen followed the direction of his finger and glanced out the window. The airplane gradually becoming a small dot and disappearing from view. A sense of panic, as if something important had been stripped from his life, gripped him. His face turned a little unsightly, and he said to Shen Weiwei, you stay here and take care of Nianxi. I'll go check on Z. She just had surgery and is still very weak. She usually has a good temper. Maybe she was just worried about the child and that's why she lost her temper with you. Don't hold it against her. Hearing the protectiveness towards Suzy in his words, Shen Weiwei's expression changed. She grabbed Fu Ziken's arm and frowned, tentatively asking, Shichen, you wouldn't have fallen for Suzy, would you? Fu Shichen should have denied it without hesitation. But the words caught in his throat. He finally just said, Weiwei, Ziyi has been married to me for so many years after all. And she even had a child. Now that she has experienced so much. As her husband, I should be by her side to take care of her. What about me? Shen Weiwei threw herself into his arms, looked up at him, acting spoiled and aggrieved. I am your legal wife. You said you didn't love Suzy. And you would give me an explanation. The reason for hiding it from her was just so she could get pregnant and use the umbilical cord blood to save Nianxi. Now that Niang's surgery is successful, when are you going to explain everything to her? Fu Shichen felt a sense of resistance in his heart for some reason, and looked at Shen Weiwei with some impatience. She loves me so much. And she just had surgery. Are you suggesting I go and rub salt in her wounds right now? His tone was extremely cold. Shen Weiwei immediately turned reedy and didn't dare to speak. Only tears flowed silently, looking weak and pitiful. But Fu Shichen wasn't in the mood to coax her, only coldly leaving a sentence. Give me some more time. After speaking, he went straight out of the ward. It wasn't until Fu Ziken's figure disappeared that Shen Weiwei raised her face and wiped away the tears on her face. Those grievances and pitifulness had long disappeared, leaving only ruthlessness. I knew you would be indecisive. So I told Suzy the truth long ago. She will never forgive you again. Fu Shichen went straight to the entrance of the operating room. The operating room still showed that surgery was in progress. But Suzy's figure was nowhere to be seen at the entrance. He hurried towards Suzy's ward, not even noticing that the person undergoing surgery had been changed. He arrived at the door of Suzy's ward, only to see the nurse disinfecting the room and remaking the bed. Fu Shichen swept his gaze around the room, but he didn't see Suzy anywhere. His expression changed, and he asked the nurse, "Where is the person who was staying in this room?" "She's been discharged," the nurse said casually while busy with her work. "Discharged? How is that possible? The child is still in surgery. How could she be discharged first? And she was so seriously injured." Fu Shichen realized something was wrong, and his heart began to panic. He walked outside, searching everywhere in the hospital, while dialing Suzy's phone. The phone beeped twice before being hung up directly. Fu Shichen frowned and called again, but couldn't get through, only hearing a busy signal. He belatedly realized that he had been blacklisted. Fu Ziken's face darkened instantly, and he switched to the messaging app to send a message to Suzy. "What are you doing?" The message was sent, followed immediately by a bright red exclamation mark. Message sent, but rejected by the other party. Fu Ziken's footsteps suddenly stopped. Looking at the line of words in disbelief, he muttered to himself, "Why?" Shen Weiwei exited the ward and happened to see him wandering around the hospital like a headless fly. She hurried to meet him, a concerned expression on her face. "Shichen, what's wrong? What are you looking for?" Fu Shichen grabbed her hand. "Ziyi is gone. And she's still angry and has blocked me. I just asked the hospital, and she and the child have been discharged. She's so badly injured. Where can she go with the child? What if she encounters danger? You quickly help me find her." He urged Shen Weiwei to find someone together. But Shen Weiwei didn't move an inch. Fu Shichen frowned and looked at her. Shen Weiwei sighed. "Actually, isn't it better if she left on her own?" Fu Ziken's face turned completely cold. "What do you mean?" Shen Weiwei said softly. "Actually, that day in the study, she saw it." Fu Shichen thought of the scene that day, and his face turned pale. Shen Weiwei continued. "Presumably, she also guessed the relationship between Nianxi and you. Her child was only 7 months old and was born prematurely. I guess the child is already gone. So she left with the child. Now that she has left on her own accord, isn't that better? It saves you from having to tell her the truth, and we won't have to be embarrassed in the future." Her tone was light, indifferent, and unrestrained. and she couldn't hide the smugness in her eyes. Fu Shichen looked at Shen Weiwei in front of him, and he only felt that she was so different from the soft and kind woman in his heart that she seemed like a stranger. He took 2 steps back, his face a little pale. It's not like this. It's not like this. He never thought of letting Su Zi leave, even if he were to be with Shen Weiwei. What he was thinking was, if Su Zi was willing, he wouldn't mind supporting her for the rest of her life. Su Zi had loved him for so many years. Loved him to the point of disregarding her dignity, always putting him first in everything. How could she leave without a word? Just like that. He clenched his fist silently, emphasizing with a pale face. Impossible. Zi loves me so much. She couldn't have left just like that. I have to find her and explain everything to her. He turned around and walked quickly out of the hospital. Shen Weiwei's voice, however, was laced with a hint of malice as she chased after him. What do you want to explain to her? Explain that Shichen isn't your child. Explain that you and I haven't slept together. Or explain that the child in her belly is just a tool you created to save Nianxi. Or, do you want to explain to her that you didn't arrange that car accident? Her every word was like a piercing sword, piercing through his heart. Shen Weiwei approached step by step and hugged him from behind. Shichen, you've already chosen me and Nianxi. And you've let Zi down. Can't we just live well as a family of 3 from now on? Do you want to let me and Nianxi down too? Fu Shichen was rooted to the spot by Shen Weiwei's words. He knew that what Shen Weiwei said was all true. He already owed Su Zi an apology. He couldn't let Shen Weiwei down as well. But in his heart, a voice was roaring and screaming madly. He regretted it. It shouldn't have been like this. That's not what he wanted. He yanked Shen Weiwei's hand away, and Fu Shichen still hurried out of the hospital. At this moment, he couldn't think about anything else. He only had one thought: he must find Su Zi. Fu Shichen rushed out of the hospital and drove back home. He pushed the door open violently and shouted anxiously, "Zi! Su Zi!" In a daze, he seemed to hear Su Zi's response. However, upon closer inspection, he realized it was all just his illusion. Inside the villa, it was completely empty. The figure that used to greet him with a smile at the first moment was nowhere to be found. Like a madman, he frantically searched the villa, repeatedly shouting Su Zi's name. Nianxi Fu's numerous toys were scattered on the floor, and the piles of things Shen Weiwei bought after moving in filled every corner of the house. His eyes searched the room for anything related to Su Zi, but he found nothing. Not a single thing. The space in the closet that belonged to her was completely empty. The photo frames she liked in the bedroom were nowhere to be seen. The place where they hung their wedding photos now displays a different painting. Without him noticing, she had been gradually withdrawing from his world. Fu Shichen searched the house until his eyes inadvertently swept across the living room. The wedding ring he gave Su Zi lay alone on the coffee table, as if mocking his current panic. The fear in Fu Zichen's heart grew even more intense. He picked up the diamond ring, clenched it tightly in his palm, and directly took out his phone to call his assistant. "Go check the madam's location immediately." The assistant was taken aback and subconsciously asked, "Which madam?" Fu Shichen was extremely annoyed. Who else could it be? Of course, it's Su Zi. The assistant quickly agreed and then cautiously asked, "President Fu, where does madam usually like to go? I'll send people to check her usual haunts first." Fu Shichen opened his mouth, but found he couldn't answer at all. He realized that he had no idea where to find Su Zi. He never paid attention to the places she liked to go, what her hobbies were, or who she liked to meet. Anyway, every time he came home, she was always there waiting for him, always within his sight, within reach, and always available. She was like a shadow around him, and he could see her as long as he turned his head. So, he took her care for granted, but he never gave her any attention in return. After a moment of silence, he realized his assistant was still waiting for his answer. He said with some difficulty, "Check if she has returned to Beicheng." The plane circled all the way, heading straight for Beicheng. Su Zi and the child lay separately on the makeshift emergency beds. The baby was forcibly delivered prematurely and was much smaller than average. His tiny body was connected to various emergency medical devices. Yet his complexion still looked very abnormal. Ever since Suzy saw the baby, tears hadn't stopped flowing. She kept staring at the baby, silently pleading and praying. Baby, it's all Mom's fault for not protecting you. Please hold on. You must hold on. Please don't leave me. Suzy had been pampered and raised by the Su family since she was a child, and was like a little princess in Beijing, looking at her sister covered in blood and in such a disheveled and miserable state. Su Xinglin couldn't wait to tear Fu Shichen apart. He clenched his fists tightly, but had to suppress his anger and comfort Suzy. Don't worry. Xingzhou is a pediatric expert with excellent medical skills. This little one will definitely be fine. Suzy looked up at Jiang Xingzhou, whom Su Xinglin was talking about. It was he and Su Xinglin who appeared together, bringing a medical team to pick them up on the plane. The man was nearly 1.9 meters tall. Although he was wearing a mask and his face couldn't be seen clearly, his eyes were gentle and deep, giving people a great sense of security. Noticing the pleading and dependent look in her eyes, the man said softly, "The child is strong, and you need to be strong too. Only when your body is well nourished will you have the energy to take care of him." Suzy was stunned for a moment, and then a brilliant light burst out in her eyes, and she grabbed Jiang Xingxi's hand tightly. "Dr. Jiang, I will definitely take good care of him. Please, you must save my child." Jiang Xingzhou looked at the hand she was holding tightly. His eyes softened for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, I believe in you. I will do my best." He exchanged a glance with Su Xinglin, and then gave Suzy a sedative injection. Suzy looked at the child beside her with reluctance, but her eyelids grew heavier and heavier, and she eventually fell into a deep sleep. Su Xinglin looked at Suzy's tear-soaked eyelashes even in her sleep, and the coldness on her face could no longer be concealed. "Dare to treat my sister Su Xinglin like this. I will make the Fu family pay the price." Jiang Xingzhou lowered his eyes and quietly looked at the sleeping Suzy, raised his hand and put it on Su Xinglin's shoulder. His tone was cold and different from when he faced Suzy. "Count me in." Su Xinglin was taken aback, then looked at him with some surprise. "Xingzhou. You." Jiang Xingzhou smiled slightly and said calmly, "Let's not talk about this now. She's suffered a great deal, both physically and mentally, and definitely won't be in the mood to consider these things anytime soon. I have the patience to wait for her. Anyway, I've waited for over a decade, so a few more days won't make a difference." Su Xinglin sighed. "How wonderful it would have been if Z had liked you back then. Unfortunately, sometimes the connection between people is just so capricious." Jiang Xingzhou slightly curved his lips. Perhaps he should also thank Fu Shichen for not cherishing her, so that he had the opportunity to wait for Suzy to come back. Suzy was in a coma for a long time before waking up. She opened her eyes and was stunned for a few seconds, then hurriedly tried to get up. "The child. My child." As soon as she moved, someone pressed her shoulder down. His handsome knuckles pressed on her left shoulder, the movement assertive yet gentle as he pushed her back. A deeply magnetic voice echoed in her ear. "The baby is fine." Suzy was overjoyed, but couldn't help looking at him. "Are you Dr. Jiang?" Jiang Xingzhou had already changed into a white coat and was checking her body data. He was still wearing a mask, and Suzy could only see his eyebrows and eyes. Hearing her words, the man gently took off his mask and looked at her with a smile. "You really don't remember me." The man had delicate features and excellent bone structure, his smiling phoenix eyes full of her reflection. In a daze, Suzy suddenly remembered. Su Xinglin was a few years older than her. When she was in junior high school, he was already in high school. He would sometimes bring friends home, and Jiang Xingzhou was one of them. Even at that most active age, he already possessed a calm and gentlemanly demeanor, with a precociousness that set him apart from his peers. At that time, although Suzy had met him, she only remembered that he was good-looking. She didn't understand love then, so naturally she couldn't understand that Jiang Xingzhou followed Su Xinglin home several times for her. The past is a bit distant, Suzy carefully looked at Jiang Xingzhou, and the man frankly let her look. Suzy couldn't help but laugh. Brother Xingzhou, you are still as good-looking as before. I didn't expect you to become a doctor. Jiang Xingzhou joked. Yeah, didn't you say when you were a kid that you were most afraid of going to the hospital and most envious of others having a doctor friend? Congratulations. You have one now. Suzy chuckled, completely unaware that he had become a doctor because of something she said. Suzy hesitated slightly, but couldn't help but ask, "Can I go see the baby?" Yes. He seemed to have anticipated her thought, and reached out his hand to her. Let's go. It's okay. I can walk on my own. Suzy waved her hand, hurrying to get out of bed. However, as soon as she moved, she pulled at the incision on her abdomen. Her face turned pale, and she fell to the side. Jiang Xingzhou took a step forward, and she fell into an embrace filled with a fresh, cool fragrance. The man sighed and bent down to pick her up. Don't rush. Your surgical wound has been torn a second time, and you've lost too much blood. You need to take good care of yourself. Suzy's face flushed. I can walk myself. It's okay. Let's go. With that, he picked her up and headed straight for the children. He carried her all the way to the neonatal intensive care unit and only put her down when they reached an incubator. Jiang Xingzhou explained. The baby is still small and premature, so he needs to stay in the incubator for a while longer. Suzy nodded, her voice choked with emotion. Okay. As long as he's okay. She stared blankly at the tiny baby sleeping soundly in the incubator, her eyes red-rimmed. She turned her head and said to Jiang Xingzhou very seriously, Xingzhou Gu. Thank you. I owe you a big favor, and if there's anything I can help you with in the future, just let me know. Jiang Xingzhou smiled and raised his hand to stroke the top of her head. I won't be polite. Although they hadn't seen each other for many years, perhaps because she had been saved by him, Suzy had a natural sense of dependence and trust in him. The two smiled at each other, their eyes turning gently to the child. Jiang Xingzhou said softly, Have you thought of a name for the child? Suzy thought for a moment, her eyes filled with tenderness as she looked at the child. Yes. He was born so tiny, so his nickname will be Zaya Beautyan Little Dot. His formal name will be Su Pingan. I don't ask for anything else in this life, just that he grows up safe and sound. Suzy stayed in the hospital for a full week before she was finally able to be discharged. It's just that the child has to stay in the hospital for the time being. Although reluctant, she had no choice but to go home and recuperate. She specifically added Jiang Xingzhou's contact information, and he would send her videos of Xiao Budian every day, detailing the child's recovery. It wasn't until after her postpartum confinement that Xiao Budian was finally able to be discharged from the hospital. Suzy couldn't wait to set off for the hospital to bring Xiao Budian home. However, as soon as she went downstairs, she saw a familiar car suddenly appear at the entrance of the Su family's villa. Suzy paused, her brows furrowing subconsciously. Sure enough, the next moment, a familiar figure got out of the car and called out to her. Z. Fu Ziken's face lit up with joy when he saw her. And then he strode towards her. The moment he saw her, the worry and anxiety he had been feeling for this period of time could no longer be contained and poured out. He pulled Suzy into a tight embrace, and said urgently, How could you block me and leave without a word? Your brother hid your whereabouts, and I couldn't contact you no matter what. Do you know how crazy I've been looking for you during this time? Later, I finally found out that you were recuperating at the Su family, and I felt a little relieved. He let go of Suzy, looked her up and down, and smiled with satisfaction. You look like you're recovering well. Z. I'm here to take you home. Come with me. What a natural tone. Anyone who didn't know would think she was just visiting her parents' home for a month after giving birth. Fu Shichen had always been indifferent to her, never so clearly expressing his concern and longing for her. If it were before, how happy Suzy would have been to hear him say these words. But at this moment, her heart was calm, even feeling a bit nauseous and ridiculous. He took it so for granted, as if he believed that with just a word from him, she would abandon all her grievances and leave with him. But now, seeing him, All she could think about was how he had arranged a car accident for the sake of Shen Weiwei and her child. Overturning her car and prematurely delivering her child from her womb. All she could think about was the pain her child had endured in the incubator for over a month. She pulled her hand back from his grasp. She rummaged through her bag for a sanitizing wipe and meticulously cleaned each finger he had touched, as if they had been contaminated by something filthy. Fu Ziken's face turned pale in an instant upon seeing her actions. Only after cleaning her fingers did Su Zi slowly look up at him, her tone laced with sarcasm. Go home. Take me back to be played by your family of 3 again. Fu Shichen. How can you still have the face to appear in front of me? Don't you know that the moment I saw you, I had only one thought, and that was, bang. She swung her hand with all her might, landing a fierce slap on Fu Ziken's face. Fu Ziken's face turned from the blow. Looking at her in disbelief, Su Zi merely frowned, looking at her palm, and said with disgust, ugh, I got dirty again, more than being hit. Su Zi's attitude made him feel even worse. Su Zi had never treated him with such a cold attitude before. And Fu Shichen was a little overwhelmed. The joy of their reunion was shattered, and he was gripped by unease. Fu Shichen explained somewhat helplessly. Z. I know you've been looking forward to this child. It's normal for you to blame me for not protecting you and the baby. It's my fault. Don't be sad. We'll have other children in the future. Su Zi glanced at him. So he didn't know the child was still alive. She sneered inwardly. With no intention of telling him, she just looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. What? Is Fu Nianxi still not well? Do you and Shen Weiwei still need to rack your brains to find another backup to save your son's life? Fu Ziken's face turned incredibly pale in an instant. He looked at her with a trembling voice. You know everything. Su Zi looked at him coldly. I know a lot of things. I just don't know which one you're asking about. As soon as she finished speaking, a car pulled up beside her. The car window rolled down, and Jiang Xingzhou looked at her from the driver's seat. Z. Su Zi's eyes lit up. The indifference on her face instantly faded, and she walked quickly towards him. Brother Xingzhou. Jiang Xingzhou cast a cold glance at Fu Shichen standing behind her, and then said gently to Su Zi. Let's go. Su Zi couldn't wait any longer and pulled open the car door to get in. But Fu Shichen pressed down on the car door. The man's intuition made him clearly aware of Jiang Xingzhou's hostility towards him, and he could see the deep meaning in the way the other man looked at Su Zi at a glance. Although they were both friends of Su Xinglin, Jiang Xingzhou was in Beicheng, while he was in Jing City, and they had never crossed paths. He frowned and looked at Su Zi. Who is he? Su Zi laughed. A laugh full of sarcasm. Are you worthy to ask? Fu Ziken's chest rose and fell with anger. Z. I am your husband. Of course I have the right to ask if you are getting too close to other men. What's more, he raised his hand and pointed at Jiang Xingzhou. He looks like he has ulterior motives towards you. Su Zi was amused by his anger. Ulterior motives. Who can compare to you? Are you my husband? But how do I remember that you couldn't wait to divorce me on the first day Shen Weiwei returned to the country? Fu Shichen looked at her in surprise. Then his eyes turned a little guilty. You know. Su Zi was too lazy to look at him again. She yanked Fu Ziken's hand away and got into the passenger seat. I told you. I know a lot. What I should know and what I shouldn't. I know everything. So, get out. I don't want to see you again. Su Zi's tone was cold, and after she finished speaking, she didn't look at him again. Fu Shichen was instantly flustered, not even caring if Jiang Xingzhou would laugh at him from the side. He hurried to Su Zi's side of the car. Z. I know I'm sorry for what happened. Back then, Weiwei and I had a drunken encounter. And I accidentally had a relationship with her, hurting her. A year ago, she suddenly came back with Nianxi, telling me that Nianxi had leukemia and needed umbilical cord blood to be cured. After all, he was my child, and I couldn't just stand by and watch him die. But back then, Weiwei had a massive hemorrhage because of giving birth to Nianxi, which led to a hysterectomy, and she couldn't have any more children. I had no choice but to hide it from you and have you give birth to a child. Saying it as if she had no other choice, but never considering that she is a person. Not a tool for having children. She has the right to choose whether to give birth or not, whether to save or not, instead of them taking advantage of her love for him, manipulating her at will, enjoying her sacrifices while saying he had his reasons. Looking at the eagerness in Fu Ziken's eyes, Suzy only smiled mockingly. Fu Shichen. You better go and investigate properly whether your precious sister really had a postpartum hemorrhage. I've found quite a few interesting things. Suzy and her child almost died because of Shen Weiwei and Fu Shichen. Those feelings she had for Fu Shichen had long since vanished like smoke. Now, she only regretted her poor judgment of character back then. Suzy. She could love and she could let go, but she would never forgive anyone who hurt her child, even if it was her child's father. During this month of resting at home, she wasn't idle either. She had been secretly investigating Shen Weiwei, and she did find a lot of good stuff. She ignored Fu Shichen and closed the car window directly, saying to Jiang Xingzhou, "Let's go. I can't wait to take my baby home." Jiang Xingzhou smiled and started the car. In the rearview mirror, Fu Ziken's figure gradually shrank, eventually disappearing from sight. He tentatively asked, "Z, what do you think of Fu Shichen? I gave up on him long ago." Suzy smiled bitterly. The Suzy who loved him died the moment he arranged the car accident and plotted for me to have a premature section. Jiang Xingxi's fingers gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles slightly white, while relieved that she had emptied that person from her heart. I felt even more sorry for the grievances she had suffered. After a long while, he whispered, "There will be someone who knows how to cherish you." Suzy chuckled. "I don't want to think about those things now. I just want to be with my child as they grow up." Anne. She took out her phone and dialed Su Xinglan's number directly. "Brother, I think Fu Shichen is still too idle. It's time to get him busy." Fu Shichen watched helplessly as the car carrying Suzy disappeared from sight, thinking of the words she left before leaving. A bit of gloom appeared between his brows. He directly called his assistant. "Go and investigate Shen Weiwei's affairs abroad in the past few years. The more detailed the better." The assistant's heart trembled, and he immediately said, "Yes." After thinking for a moment, Fu Shichen added, "Also, investigate the events that occurred before Z left." Seeing Suzy's attitude towards Shen Weiwei now, he vaguely realized that something was wrong. Taking a deep look at the Su family's residence, he got into the car and instructed the driver to return to Jing City first. He had been living in the villa with Suzy during this time. Shen Weiwei and Fu Nianxi were also there. He used to think that the three of them living together was very happy, but now that Suzy is gone, he finds Shen Weiwei and Fu Nianxi too noisy. Fu Nianxi's toys were scattered everywhere, and Shen Weiwei's things were also strewn all over the place. Not at all like when Suzy was here, arranging and organizing the house neatly and orderly. He also found Shen Weiwei's aesthetic hard to agree with. When he returned to the villa, Shen Weiwei had just taken the children out. Stepping into the house, looking at the mess on the floor, he pinched his brow and said to the servant irritably, "Clean up the house." The servant hurried off to busy herself. He turned and sat on the sofa, just as his assistant rushed in, handing him a document. Looking at the assistant's troubled expression, Fu Ziken's heart sank. He pinched the file and asked in a heavy tone, "What did you find?" The assistant looked at him with some sympathy. "President Fu, you should see for yourself." Fu Shichen unconsciously held his breath and opened the file. He couldn't help but pause as soon as he opened the first page. On top of the folder were some developed photos. The men in the photos were all different, but the woman was the same. Shen Weiwei. She wore heavy makeup and revealing clothes, some of which barely covered her vital parts. She flirted with different men, doing everything she could to please them. In some photos, she even looked 7 or 8 months pregnant. The hand that Fu Shichen held the document with began to tremble uncontrollably. The assistant had been with Fu Shichen for many years and had personally witnessed how devoted Fu Shichen was to Shen Weiwei. Everyone thought Fu Shichen was cold and indifferent, aloof and distant towards women. But he knew that Fu Zikan's phone contained many solo photos of Shen Weiwei, which he often took out to look at for comfort. Fu Shichen had liked Shen Weiwei since he was a teenager, but because she was an adopted daughter of the Fu family, even without blood ties, a family like the Fu family could not accept such a scandal. But some feelings are like this. The more restrained, the more intense. However, even though he didn't particularly like Shen Weiwei, he never imagined she would be this kind of person. President Fu. Shen Weiwei did have her uterus removed due to a massive hemorrhage during childbirth abroad. However, childbirth is only one of the reasons. The biggest reason is that she was playing too wildly with her sugar daddy when she was about to give birth, leading to an intrauterine infection. Fu Shichen remained silent, already flipping through Shen Weiwei's medical records from her time abroad. The words above were clear, exactly as the assistant had described. And Shen Weiwei was hospitalized several times during her pregnancy because of those things. After the child was born, he was diagnosed with leukemia. It's hard to say whether it was related to her smoking, drinking, and indulging herself during pregnancy. The assistant sighed beside him. President Fu, I also found out that Shen Weiwei's relationship with you back then was not an accident. She originally planned to use you to climb up the social ladder, but she didn't dare let the Fu family know her thoughts. So she could only pretend to have been forced by you. As soon as the Fu family had an accident, she used this incident to ask Mr. and Mrs. Fu for a large sum of money and ran away with it. After going abroad, she thought the child belonged to another sugar daddy and had been the man's mistress abroad. Not long after the child was born, he was found to be ill. The man took the child for treatment and accidentally found out that he was not his own. Beat Shen Weiwei up and threw the child back to her. She originally didn't want to take care of the child and wanted to throw it directly into the trash. But later, she unexpectedly learned that with the help of the Su family, the Fu family not only didn't go bankrupt but was even developing better than before. She immediately took the child back to the country to find you. The child wasn't originally called Fu Nianxi and was surnamed Ding. The servants, busy in the house, overheard their conversation. Several of them couldn't help but gather around Fu Shichen to complain. Sir, this Shen Weiwei is not a good person at all. When you're not home, I often hear her flirting with other men on the phone. The way she talks is very suggestive, and she never takes care of the child. When the madam was here, she would leave the child to the madam, who was pregnant, to take care of, while she ran out to get beauty treatments and manicures. She only pretends to be an innocent little flower in front of you. Exactly. Last time she was chatting with another man, and I only glanced at her, and she slapped me, warning me that if I dared to tell you any of this, she would fire me and call the police to arrest me, falsely accusing me of stealing things from the house. Last time, she deliberately showed off in front of the madam about being with you in the study, and deliberately pushed the young master down, causing him to get hurt. But as soon as you appeared, she falsely accused the madam of doing it. The servants all spoke at once, revealing everything Shen Weiwei had done during this time, listening to each and every detail. Fu Zikan's mind was filled with Su Zi's expressions from that time. She was always restrained and aggrieved. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about explaining, but before she could even open her mouth, he would preemptively assume it was all her fault, again and again, until finally, the light in her eyes was gone, and she no longer had any desire to explain things to him. She just looked at him indifferently, favoring Shen Weiwei again and again, and then little by little, stopped loving him. At the thought of this, Fu Zikan's heart felt as if it was grabbed by a big hand, hurting him so much that he couldn't breathe. The documents in his hand slipped and scattered all over the floor. How laughable! How laughable! He actually hurt his wife, who had loved him deeply for 6 years and was devoted to him, for a woman like Shen Weiwei. The assistant's phone suddenly rang. He answered it, his expression changing after listening, and said anxiously, President Fu, you and Shen Weiwei are trending. The trending topic says that you designed a car accident to cause your wife to have a premature birth for Shen Weiwei. As soon as the assistant finished speaking, the expressions of the servants present towards Fu Shichen became stern. The servants didn't know the inside story, but they were all frightened when they heard this. This is Too vicious. Thinking about Shen Weiwei's usual behavior. How would she dare without Fu Ziken's indulgence? The crowd exchanged glances. And the first person took the lead in resigning. I quit. Working for people like you. Who knows if you'll push me out to take the blame one day? The others chimed in. Exactly. I quit too. If you can scheme against your wife and children for your mistress. Who knows if we'll be next? In the blink of an eye. Most of the servants were gone. Fu Ziken's gaze swept over the mess on the floor. The phone rang at the same time. The call came from the old Fu family house. Fu's father's voice was cold and deep. Bring Shen Weiwei back here immediately. Fu Ziken's voice was strained. Okay. However. Fu's father quickly added with annoyance. Forget it. I'll send someone to bring her here. Don't be seen with her. It will have a greater impact. Fu Shichen paused. Remained silent for a few seconds. And still said. Okay. After hanging up. The assistant was frantic. President Fu. What do we do now? Not only the car accident you designed for your wife, but also your affair with Shen Weiwei has become a trending topic. Many netizens are now protesting and cursing under Fu's official account. And Fu's stock has already begun to plummet. Who the hell did this? I'll investigate it now. Fu Shichen listened in silence, then pinched his brow, and said lightly, no need to investigate. I'll handle it. He had already guessed that the person who did this must be a member of the Su family. It was nothing more than to vent anger for Su Zi. He owed her in the first place. Thinking of Su Zi. Fu Shichen felt a pang of bitterness in his heart. Fu Shichen walked out with heavy steps and drove back to the Fu family. As soon as he entered the gate of the Fu family's old house, he saw that Shen Weiwei and Fu Nianxi had already arrived. Fu Nianxi was wailing and crying. And Shen Weiwei was also kneeling on the ground. Her eyes red as she tried to explain. Dad. Mom. We were forced into this situation. This must have been done by Su Zi. She just can't stand to see us doing well. Nianxi got sick. And we were left with no choice. I can't have children. So isn't it her duty, as Ziken's wife, to bear him children? Besides, even if she loses this child, she can always have another one. The reason Shichen arranged the car accident was just because he was afraid she would be sad. So he went to all that trouble. Right. It was all for her own good. Now, all she's doing is trying to vent her anger and force Shichen to come back to her. Shen Weiwei's every word pushed everything onto Su Zi. Hearing her words, Fu Shichen could no longer bear it and shouted angrily. Shut up. You have no right to talk about Zi. Shen Weiwei was stunned. And when she turned her head to see Fu Shichen, her eyes immediately became even redder. She initially thought that the reason Fu Shichen suddenly mentioned Su Zi was just because he felt a little guilty for scheming against her, since Su Zi left on her own accord more than a month ago. Fu Shichen has been acting like a madman, searching for her everywhere. He thinks of Su Zi all the time, wanting to save a portion of anything good for her, even calling out Su Zi's name in his dreams, saying he's sorry to her. In the past, Shen Weiwei could still use Fu Nianxi to get close to him, but after Su Zi left, he even became colder towards Fu Nianxi, not to mention the several times she tried to get into his bed. She was kicked out by Fu Shichen. The innocent and delicate facade she wore in front of Fu Shichen could no longer be maintained. At this moment, after being coldly rebuked by Fu Shichen, Shen Weiwei could no longer bear it. Her voice was sharp and self-righteous as she said, Su Zi. Su Zi. All you know is Su Zi. Did I say something wrong? Since she likes you so much, isn't it only right that she be used by you? It's her blessing that her child can save Nianxi. Now you know you like her. What were you doing before? It's too late. Fu Shichen. I am your wife now. You're Mrs. Fu. You should be thinking of me, protecting me, not a woman who doesn't want you anymore. Fu Shichen watched her mouth open and close, every word of which he disliked. He couldn't bear it any longer and shouted loudly, Enough. Shut up. As the words left his mouth, his hand also swung out. Bang. Ah. Shen Weiwei was knocked to the ground by his slap. She immediately covered her face, her eyes bloodshot as she looked at him. Fu Shichen. How dare you hit me? You actually hit me for Suzy. She struggled to get up from the ground and lunged at Fu Shichen. Ready to fight. The child was frightened and cried loudly. Shen Weiwei screamed and cursed like a madwoman. The scene was chaotic. Fu Shichen pushed her away. But his face was still scratched several times by her. He couldn't bear it any longer and slammed the pile of documents he had brought onto Shen Weiwei's face. You still have the nerve to make a scene. Look at these things. Explain yourself. Shen Weiwei was hit in the face again by the documents, her cheeks burning with pain. However, after seeing the contents clearly, she felt as if she had been doused with a bucket of ice water, and the blood in her entire body turned cold. Impossible. She had secretly cleaned up all of this. How could Fu Shichen still find it? Father Fu and Mother Fu looked at the documents on the ground, and then looked at Shen Weiwei in disbelief. They knew that Shen Weiwei had many thoughts, but they didn't expect her to be so rotten. Shen Weiwei looked at Fu Shichen with a pale face, desperately throwing away the documents, and said in a trembling voice, "These must have been photoshopped by Suzy. They are all fake. This is not me. I have never done these things." Fu Shichen looked at her with a dark and gloomy expression. "Is that so? Then why don't I bring each of the men in these photos here for a confrontation?" Shen Weiwei's expression changed drastically. In the next moment, her face changed, and she threw herself forward with a look of grievance, hugging Fu Zaikan's leg and crying pitifully. "It's me. I admit these are all me, but I had no choice. I was forced to do it. I went abroad alone, with no one to rely on, and the little money I had was swindled away. I can't do anything, and in order to survive, I can only sell my body." She cried sincerely, but unfortunately, Fu Shichen would never believe it again. Looking at her clumsy acting, he laughed instead, closing his eyes in pain. How could he have ever liked such a woman? When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with coldness. He lowered his eyes to look at Shen Weiwei, the affection of the past no longer remaining in his eyes. Shen Weiwei's heart sank. He had been too special and tolerant of her these years, almost making her forget that he was never a good person. At this moment, Fu Shichen simply dropped a cold sentence, lightly pushing her towards hell. "Since you like selling your body so much, why not go and sell it to your heart's content? It can be considered atonement for what you've done." After speaking, he instructed the bodyguard, "Send her to Fuss Club. Have her receive at least 100 guests every day, and satisfy her well." Shen Weiwei was immediately terrified and looked at him in horror. "No, brother. Fu Shichen, don't do this to me. I know I was wrong. I don't want anything anymore. Please don't do this to me. Fu Shichen, I will die if you send me to the club. I will die. Don't you love me the most? We grew up together. How can you treat me like this? I am the mother of your child." Fu Shichen. Fu Shichen. No matter how much she cried and screamed, the bodyguards dragged her out directly. She was too noisy, so they stuffed a rag into her mouth, and she could no longer shout. Fu Shichen looked at Fu Nianxi, who was crying incessantly from fright. After returning to China, Fu Nianxi immediately did a DNA test, and it was indeed his child. Fu Nianxi's eyebrows and eyes, almost identical to his own as a child, also indicated their relationship. But when he saw Fu Nianxi, he would think of the child in Suzy's womb who had been killed by him. Even if it wasn't Fu Nianxi's fault, he still didn't want to see him at this moment. He turned to Mr. and Mrs. Fu and said in a low voice, "Leave the child in the old house to be raised. Shen Weiwei is ill-intentioned and not worthy of being the child's mother." Mr. Fu originally wanted to question him, but seeing Fu Zaikan's actions, he could only sigh. Mrs. Fu looked at Fu Shichen with tears in her eyes. "Helpless. You are really confused. Ziyi has been married to you for so many years, and she has been concerned about everything concerning me and your father, even more so than you, her own son. Not to mention that when our Fu family was in an economic crisis back then, it was Ziyi's parents who helped us get through these years safely. How can you treat her like this? Now the Fu family's stock has plummeted, and the Su and Jiang families are jointly suppressing the Fu family. The Fu family is also being criticized online. Have you thought about how to deal with it? Fu Shichen was silent for a few seconds before speaking seriously. I know I was wrong. Ziyi has loved me for 6 years. And I don't believe she can let go so easily. As long as she can forgive me, I am willing to do anything. Don't worry. I will win Ziyi back. His attitude was firm. But Father Fu and Mother Fu felt in their hearts that it was not optimistic. Don't even mention Su Ziyi. Even they, as Fu Ziken's parents, felt that his behavior was truly unforgivable. Su Ziyi had no idea what he was thinking, and even if she did, she would probably just say, wishful thinking. She took the child back home. The nursery had already been prepared in the house, using only the best materials. Almost as soon as she brought the child home, she stayed by the child's side at all times. If her parents and Su Xinglin hadn't stopped her, she would have kept the child in her arms 24 hours a day. She didn't care about the advice that holding the child for too long would make it difficult for them to sleep on their own. Now the child was her life, her treasure. When Jiang Xingzhou came to the Su family and didn't see her, he knew she must be in the children's room again. He pinched his phone and entered the children's room. And sure enough, he saw Su Ziyi leaning next to the little one, muttering to herself. Jiang Xingzhou leaned against the door frame, watching her, until Su Ziyi sensed something was wrong. She turned her head and met his gaze. Only then did she remember that this was the day she was taking the little one back to the hospital for a checkup, and couldn't help but laugh. Why didn't you call me when you came? During this time, Jiang Xingzhou took care of everything and reminded her. And she unconsciously became a little more dependent on him. Her heart suddenly faltered, and her expression became unnatural. Jiang Xingzhou stepped forward with a smile, gently picked up Xiaobudian's little hand with tenderness in his eyes, teasing it softly, and said casually, no rush. Just letting you know, by the way, Fuss has officially apologized. Su Ziyi picked up her phone and glanced at it, discovering that the Fu Corporation had issued a statement, formally apologizing to Su Ziyi. And that statement was issued in Fu Ziken's tone. What surprised Su Ziyi was that he openly admitted the matter between him and Shen Weiwei. And the Fu family had officially severed ties with Shen Weiwei, expelling her from the Fu family. As for Fu Nianxi, she would be raised by Fu Ziken's parents. Although Fu Shichen formally apologized to Su Ziyi publicly, because their previous actions were too egregious, many people still didn't accept it and continued to bombard the Fu Corporation's account with insults, boycotting Fu Corporation's products. For a time, Shen Weiwei and Fu Shichen became like rats crossing the street, reviled by everyone. Many of Fu Corporation's partners also publicly terminated their contracts, and Fu Corporation suddenly became the target of public criticism. Facing a multitude of crises, Jiang Xingzhou bent down and skillfully held the child in his arms. After reading it, Su Ziyi showed no expression on her face, directly put away her phone, and turned to pack the children's belongings. The two walked downstairs side by side. However, as soon as they stepped out of the door, they saw Fu Ziken's figure waiting outside. The moment she saw him, a sense of annoyance arose in Su Ziyi's heart. He subconsciously wanted Jiang Xingzhou to hold him again, but it was too late. When he saw Su Ziyi, his eyes lit up, and the next moment, his gaze fell on the baby in Jiang Xingxi's arms. The child had been born for more than a month. Although his size was not as big as that of a normally born child, he looked much healthier. The little one was sleeping soundly in the man's arms, which was heartwarming to see. Fu Shichen subconsciously moved quickly towards the child. He's mine. As he approached, Shen Ziyi stepped forward, directly blocking his view. He has nothing to do with you. Fu Shichen glanced at Jiang Xingzhou holding the little one, then turned his gaze to Su Ziyi, his eyes reddening with excitement. He didn't die, did he? This is our child. That's great. Ziyi, that's great. Su Ziyi laughed mockingly. Don't you think you're being hypocritical? You arranged the car accident, and the moment you decided to sacrifice him, he had absolutely nothing to do with you. Our child. No, he's mine alone. Fu Ziken's eyes lingered greedily on the child, and he choked. I know I was terribly wrong. I am unforgivable. I only beg you to give me a chance to atone for you and the child. Z. For all these years. You have been chasing after me. And I didn't cherish you. I know I was wrong. And I have seen my own heart clearly. I have already taught Shen Weiwei a lesson. Give me a chance. And I will be good to you and the child in the future. The child's growth also needs a father to be with him. Jiang Xingzhou was very clear about how much Su Zi cared about the child, and was very worried that she would soften because of the child. He looked at Fu Shichen coldly, and couldn't help but say, the child needs a father, but not necessarily you. Fu Ziken's expression immediately turned cold and stern. This is a matter between my wife and me. It's not for an outsider like you to comment. Hearing Fu Ziken's attitude towards Jiang Xingzhou, Su Zi immediately pulled Jiang Xingzhou behind her, her attitude extremely protective. Fu Shichen, if it weren't for Xingzhou Gu, Xiao Budian and I would have been killed by you and Shen Weiwei long ago. He is the savior of Xiao Budian and me. You have no right to speak to him like that. Xingzhou Gu is right. My child may need a father, but he doesn't need this kind of father who wants to use his life to extend someone else's. You are not qualified. I'm warning you. Don't even think about fighting me for custody of the child. I have a signed agreement from you relinquishing custody and evidence of the car accident you arranged. You have no right to fight me. As for you saying you know you were wrong, so what? You didn't cherish me when I loved you. Why do you think I have to keep groveling at your feet just because you've turned back? Fu Shichen, I don't love you anymore. Not only do I not love you, but I also hate you. I don't want to see you ever again. After saying that, she directly pulled Jiang Xingzhou and walked out. Fu Shichen hurriedly chased after her. No, don't go. I really know I was wrong. Give me another chance. Don't let my child call someone else daddy. I sincerely want to make it up to you. Z. He reached out to grab Su Zi, but Jiang Xingzhou suddenly scooped up the little one with one arm, and with the other hand, he grabbed his outstretched hand and used a clever trick. Fu Ziken's wrist hurt, and he subconsciously groaned and let go. Jiang Xingzhou glanced at him coldly, then protected Su Zi and left. Fu Shichen was unwilling and wanted to step forward, but Su Xinglan's voice came from inside the Su family. That's enough. How long do you want to pester? Fu Shichen was stunned and turned back to meet Su Xinglan's cold gaze. He hurried forward. Xinglin, I really know I was wrong now. Please help me persuade her to come back to my side. I really know how to cherish her now. Su Xinglin burst out laughing when he heard his words. Fu Shichen was stunned by his laughter. The next moment, Su Xinglan's expression turned grim, and then he clenched his fist and punched Fu Shichen hard in the face. Bang! Fu Shichen staggered back several steps from the punch. Su Xinglin rushed forward, clenched his fists, and punched him again and again. Ferociously. You still dare to ask me to persuade my sister? Persuade her to do what? Persuade her to jump into this pit of fire that is you again. Fu Shichen, I treated you like my best brother, and this is how you treat my family. My sister liked you and pursued you. You could have just rejected her, but since you agreed to marry her, why didn't you cherish her? If you didn't want her, you should have refused. You should have just gotten a divorce. What did you promise me before the wedding? I told you, even if you didn't marry Z, for the sake of our brotherhood, I would find a way to help the Fu family through the crisis. You told me you would live a good life with Z. You wanted the Su family's funding. Yet you trampled on my sister's love. And you still want to mess around with your slutty adopted sister. You can sacrifice your own wife and children so easily, and now you dare to say you regret it, that you were wrong. You're just an animal. Su Xinglin cursed as he punched Fu Ziken's face repeatedly. Fu Shichen was beaten into a daze, falling to the ground, but he didn't fight back at all. Su Xinglan's fist was painful, but his words were even more so. Fu Shichen let him beat him black and blue, blood spilling from his mouth. It wasn't until Su Xinglin beat him into a daze that he vaguely remembered more things. Actually, at that time, he really wanted to live a good life with Su Zi. He had never met a girl like Su Zi, so passionate and flamboyant, so proactive and bright in expressing her love. He always thought that this passion would burn out quickly, Perhaps Suzy was just acting on a whim, which was why she said she liked him. But he didn't expect her love to last so long. He always thought that the person he loved was Shen Weiwei. That was his obsession when he was young, his unrequited love. But he never expected that he had been moved by Suzy countless times over the years. His mind was already full of her figure, but he himself belatedly failed to notice. Fu Shichen was beaten to the ground, looking at Su Xinglin in a mess. Hit me, as long as you can help me. I really can't live without Z. Su Xinglin's smile was icy. You're dreaming. Because of Fu Ziken's appearance, Su Zi's mood had been low. It wasn't until she held the child in her arms, watching the little one sleeping soundly, that the anxiety in her heart calmed down a bit. Jiang Xingzhou completed a systematic checkup for the child, confirming that the child was growing well and becoming healthier. And Su Zi breathed a long sigh of relief. Just then, the hospital director rushed over and called out to Jiang Xingzhou. Dr. Jiang, there's a surgery. Jiang Xingzhou had specifically arranged to rest that day, but now that the director had caught him to do the heavy lifting, he turned back to look at Su Zi helplessly. Su Zi smiled knowingly. You go ahead and get busy. I can take Xiao Budian back. Jiang Xingzhou was a little worried. Wait a bit. I'll arrange a car to take you back. Su Zi pushed him back. Okay. I'll just take a taxi back. She carried the child out of the hospital, all the way to the hospital entrance. She held the little one in one hand and was about to call a taxi with her phone in the other when suddenly a figure rushed towards her, her hands suddenly empty. Su Zi looked up abruptly, only to find that the little one in her arms was gone. Her face changed drastically, and she panicked immediately. Little one, my child. She saw not far ahead, a disheveled woman holding her child, rushing forward desperately. Su Zi rushed over quickly. Stop. Give me back my child. Stop. Fu Shichen was originally at the hospital to apply medicine, and as soon as he came out, he saw her running past him. Z. Fu Shichen hurriedly chased after her. He only saw the woman holding the little one running for her life, carrying the child all the way onto the overpass. Then, she suddenly stopped, turning her head to look at Su Zi and Fu Shichen. You two stop right there. Don't come any closer. If you come any closer, I'll throw him down. The woman's voice was rough and unpleasant. Her hair was disheveled, and her clothes were tattered, making her look like a homeless woman. But after seeing her face, Su Zi recognized her as Shen Weiwei. Su Zi looked at her in disbelief. It's you. Shen Weiwei held the little one with one hand, lifting him high. The little one was startled awake and was now struggling and crying loudly. Su Zi and Fu Shichen were so frightened that they stopped abruptly. Fu Shichen stared coldly at Shen Weiwei on the overpass, his eyes gloomy and terrifying. Shen Weiwei, what exactly do you want? Put the child down now. If anything happens to my son, I will never let you go. Shen Weiwei laughed out loud at his words. Fu Shichen, you took my child away, and you even sent me to that kind of place. Do you know how dirty those men are? I was forced to lie in that kind of place every day, by those men. I'm already living a life worse than death. How else are you not going to let me go? Her eyes stared fixedly at Fu Shichen and Su Zi, filled with a mixture of hatred and jealousy. Why was Su Zi born a little princess, cherished and raised in the palm of someone's hand, while I, Shen Weiwei, am an orphan who can only carefully eke out a living in the Fu family? Why was my child taken away, my life ruined, while you, Su Zi, can still live well and have happiness? Even after you betrayed him, there's still such a good man waiting for her with deep affection. If I'm not doing well, none of you can even think about doing well. Fu Ziken's chest heaved violently with anger at her words. Shen Weiwei, although you're an orphan, since you entered the Fu family, who hasn't treated you like a precious gem? When the Fu family had problems, you ran faster than anyone else, and even took away a large amount of the Fu family's assets. Z doesn't owe you anything. She did nothing wrong. Yet you repeatedly used and schemed against her. If you weren't so selfish and constantly scheming, how could you have ended up like this? Release the child now. and I can forgive what happened in the past. Don't continue down the wrong path. Suzy watched the child crying incessantly in Shen Weiwei's arms, and felt as if her heart was being torn apart. She couldn't even bring herself to reprimand Shen Weiwei. Her legs were weak, and she could barely stand. She leaned on Fu Shichen for support, preventing herself from falling to the ground, tears streaming down her face. She was in no mood to argue about who was right and who was wrong, only looking at Shen Weiwei with pleading eyes. Shen Weiwei, whatever you want, please, for the sake of him saving your son. Let my son go. He's only a month old. He's innocent. What do you want? Money or anything else? You let him go. I promise you anything. Shen Weiwei laughed, looking at Suzy with a serious expression. Then if I told you to die, would you agree? Suzy was taken aback, but immediately nodded without hesitation. I agree. Fu Ziken's expression changed drastically, and he immediately objected. No way. He took a step forward and looked at Shen Weiwei seriously. It was me who arranged Nianxi in the old house. And it was me who sent you to the club. If you want to hate, hate me. Z and the child have done nothing to you. If you want revenge, if you want compensation, come at me. Suzy looked at him in astonishment. Fu Shichen noticed Suzy's gaze. He smiled suddenly, despite his bruised and swollen face, and then said earnestly with red eyes, Z, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. He really knew he was wrong. But it was too late. Shen Weiwei stood there watching him, and when she heard his words, tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. Tears streamed down her face, filled with sorrow and indignation. A man's true heart is indeed the most unreliable thing. Back then, you thought you had taken advantage of me, so you felt guilty and wanted to compensate me and Nianxi. So you were willing to do anything, even if it meant hurting Suzy. Now you think you owe Suzy, so you hurt me casually for her sake. But Fu Shichen, even if you haven't realized it yourself, I saw it long ago. You were moved by her a long time ago, and sooner or later you would betray me. It's precisely because I saw through you long ago that I had to resort to every means to force you to break up with her, with no turning back. You scold me for being greedy, but aren't you the same, wanting both a wife and a lover? How can there be such a good thing in the world? A man like you. How could I dare to trust wholeheartedly that you would be good to me for a lifetime? Shen Weiwei blamed everyone and everything but never blamed herself. She wiped the tears from her face, her eyes full of malice as she looked at Fu Shichen and Shenzi. You want to protect them, mother and son. I'm going to make sure she dies. Suzy, jump down from here. As long as you jump, whether you live or die, I will let your son go. Fu Shichen was furious. You're crazy. Shen Weiwei laughed triumphantly. You're not qualified to negotiate with me. If you don't jump, then ill. As she spoke, she shook the little one in her hand. Suzy hurriedly cried out, I'll jump, I'll jump. At this moment, several people stood on the overpass, below the bridge. Cars came and went. If Suzy suddenly jumped down, the cars below wouldn't have time to brake and would hit her directly, and her life would probably come to an abrupt end. However, Suzy just glanced at it and climbed up without hesitation. She glanced at Shen Weiwei. I hope you can do what you say. Fu Ziken's heart was completely wrenched, and he reached out to grab her arm. Z, don't. You can't. Suzy looked at her son not far away, but her mood was extremely calm. Fu Shichen, if I die and our son survives, I hope you can leave them with my parents. Don't take the children away. Loving you is so exhausting. I didn't expect that even though I don't love you anymore, I'm still being implicated by you. In the next life, I don't want to meet you again. Suzy's calm words pierced Fu Ziken's heart with unbearable pain. He looked at her, heartbroken, but his eyes suddenly turned firm. Z, I'm sorry to have disappointed you and our son. I'm truly sorry. But this time, I won't let you bear it alone anymore. Before Suzy could react, she saw Fu Shichen suddenly turn around and rush toward Shen Weiwei. Shen Weiwei's face changed drastically. Fu Shichen, what are you doing? Don't come over here. I'll drop the child. I'll drop him. Panicked, She subconsciously threw the child towards the underpass. Suzy shouted in horror. Little Bean. Fu Shichen had already rushed to Shen Weiwei's side, and then jumped directly from the overpass railing. Shen Weiwei saw his action. Her face changed drastically with fright. And she subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab him. Brother, don't. However, her body was pulled by Fu Shichen, and she flipped over the railing, chasing after him. Fu Shichen went straight for the child, catching the little one in the air with both hands. Holding him tightly in his arms, the group fell straight down. Bang, bang, bang. The car braked sharply, but still hit Fu Shichen and Shen Weiwei. Fu Shichen rolled several times in the air before falling to the ground, where he lay motionless. Shen Weiwei also fell to the ground, her eyes wide open, staring intently in Fu Zaikan's direction. Blood spread beneath them both. In that instant, Suzy felt as if she couldn't breathe. She stared intently at Fu Shichen and the little one on the ground. Fu Shichen, little one. Suzy stumbled down, then with a thud, knelt down beside Fu Shichen. She reached out her hand, trembling all over, but didn't dare to look at the child in Fu Zaikan's arms, until a faint cry came from the swaddling clothes. Little Bean, Little Bean. Suzy quickly took Little Bean and held her in her arms. She saw that the child was unharmed because Fu Shichen had held her in his arms, but was crying loudly because she was frightened. Suzy couldn't hold back any longer and burst into tears, her face full of the ecstatic joy of finding something she had lost. And Fu Shichen, lying on the ground, looked at her crying and laughing face, and slowly revealed a smile. Fortunately, this time, I finally protected you and our son. As soon as he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Suzy couldn't help but look at him with tears in her eyes, holding his hand. The hospital is right next door. I'll take you there right away. You'll be fine. Even if she didn't want to be with Fu Shichen anymore, she never wanted him to die. Fu Shichen held her hand tightly, and said seriously, actually, that day, when the car accident happened, I regretted it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Suzy suddenly remembered that day when the car accident happened. Fu Shichen suddenly rushed over and protected her and the baby in his arms. Unfortunately, he still couldn't protect them in the end, and it came to this result. Suzy's tears never stopped. She could only hold his hand tightly. However, Fu Zaikan's eyes were still gradually losing focus, and he unconsciously repeated, I'm sorry. The hospital where Jiang Xingzhou worked was nearby. Hearing about the accident here, he realized something was wrong and rushed out like a madman. Immediately spotting Suzy kneeling on the ground, he rushed over and was relieved to see that Suzy was not injured. Medical staff rushed Fu Shichen and Shen Weiwei to the hospital for emergency treatment. Suzy and the child also returned to the hospital for examination. After confirming that the child was fine, Suzy waited outside the operating room with the child in her arms. Fu Shichen and Shen Weiwei were sent into the operating room for emergency treatment for an hour. The medical staff looked at her with regret. I'm sorry. We have done our best. Suzy's body went limp, and she fell backward. Jiang Xingzhou supported her in time, preventing her from falling to the ground. Suzy looked in the direction of the medical books, and finally couldn't help but her eyes welled up with tears. Fu Zaikan's body was sent back to Jing City. The moment Mother Fu saw Fu Shichen, she fainted from crying. Fu's father also teared up, wiping away tears incessantly. Fu Shichen was soon properly buried. After much consideration, Suzy decided to bring Xia Beautian to his funeral. 1 year later, Xia Beautian could already run around, constantly shouting Mama. Suzy heard him call her 800 times a day, which was both sweet and vexing. Since the Shen Weiwei incident a year ago, Suzy had specifically arranged bodyguards for him, watching him secretly for 20 hours a day, just in case. The little one, despite being so young, had already started learning self-defense. Watching the little guy clench his small fists, following Jiang Xingzhou, punching one punch after another, looking so earnest, she couldn't help but laugh. When it was break time, She quickly brought over 2 cups of water and 2 towels. The older one took the item, and the little one threw himself into Susie's arms. Susie looked at him gently. Are you tired? The little one thought he was just playing a game, and instead of being tired, he was very excited. Not tired. Susie turned her head and exchanged a smile with Jiang Xingzhou. Jiang Xingzhou slowly crouched down next to her, then suddenly took out a jewelry box and handed it to her. Z, when will you agree to me, so that I can take care of you and Xiao Budian legitimately? In the past year or so, she has seen all of Jiang Xingzhou's efforts for her. At this moment, looking at the man's gentle and deep eyes, Susie slowly reached out her hand, signaling him to put the ring on her finger. Now, the end.